Hi BookTube, welcome back to my channel. My name is Shawn. I am just one reader and welcome to another Friday Reads update video. This week I finished reading The Overstory by Richard Powers, winner of the Pulitzer Prize. This I read as part of a read-along organized by Leo, my friend from A Little Book Life. He organized a read-along with wonderful people from all around the globe, and we were supposed to read this during all of June, but I read quite ahead of schedule, and I already finished it. Now, I have enjoyed participating in the read-along and hearing and reading and listening to all these wonderful people talk about such an important book. Now, I'm gonna put that aside and let you know that I really disliked this book. It was not for me. So, The Overstory, what is it? You probably have heard of this book. You probably know the essential bits of what this book is. But let me just remind you. The Overstory is a novel that is very much about ecology and very particularly about trees. How trees are these representations of nature and the power of nature against man, and it's about the relationships between trees and humankind and all of that. So it's a book about trees, but it's also a book that is structured as a tree. So you have a first opening section of the book, which is the roots of the tree. And I really liked this section, actually, because in this section, Richard Powers gives us, the readers, all of the backstories of the characters in the story. So it reads like short stories, 9 separate short stories, each one about a character, and we get their backstory, the story of where they come from, who their families are. They are coming to the country of the United States of America, and they are in some way related or associated with a particular tree. So that section of the book, The Roots, which reads like a short story collection, I enjoyed. I thought it was okay. I thought there were some stories in there that were very good and very enjoyable, with a lot of rich symbolism and beautiful language. There were some other stories that I didn't care for as much, but overall it was a good introduction to the book, so I was enthusiastic. I was quite enthusiastic about it. Then the second section of the book begins, and the book just falls down. It just completely lost everything that it had going for it, in my opinion. This is a very unpopular opinion. I know people love this book to death. I mean, people absolutely go crazy about this book, and I think I can see why, but it is a very unpopular, potentially controversial opinion, something that could probably get me killed and dilapidated on BookTube. But I don't care. I'm gonna say it anyway, because I think it's important to discuss books that are so well regarded and so popular. I think it's important to also express our negative views or reviews on books such as this one. So from the second section of the book, which is the trunk of the tree, Richard Powers begins doing something that I was never really in for. I never bought it. I never liked it. And it just became worse and worse and worse. First of all, the writing becomes ridiculous. It became melodramatic. It became very corny. It became, in terms of how the plot lines, the characters' stories that you had read previously as short stories now become the same story, or they become intersecting, intertwining, interconnecting, which is good. I like those kinds of things. But here, it was ridiculous. It was unbelievable. It always felt very artificial to me. I always felt like I could see what Richard Powers was doing backstage, like all the manipulating that he had to do in order to make me feel. And I never like that. I always find that very patronizing. And yeah, I didn't feel taken into account as an intelligent reader. I felt like it was such a heavy-handed book. So the stories begin to interconnect in ways that defy the laws of nature, and the laws of fiction, and I just didn't like that. Then the writing becomes a mixture of plain, boring, uninteresting, meandering writing, and then it's also incredibly lyrical with a lot of alliteration and 1,000 different adjectives. And then, of course, we have the message, the themes of the book, which are themes that I think I agree with. It's a very eco-activist, it really is a very eco-minded book. It's not just fiction. It's fiction with a very clear agenda. And I happen to agree with Richard Powers's messages here, in terms of how we as a society, as a world, we have become very obsessed, addicted to capitalism and consumerism, and we are not paying attention to nature and the beautiful simplicity and the power and the grand scheme of things and what trees represent and all of that. So I was able to see those messages because they are so evident on every freaking page, and I happen to agree with everything that he's saying, philosophically, ideologically, politically. But that doesn't mean that I need to like the book, as a novel. I really, really disliked it because it felt patronizing, it felt so heavy-handed, and it felt ridiculous. I don't think the writing style is for me. It felt, again, very boring, very plain, and then just laughably bad in terms of melodrama, and everything was so dramatic and so all of these characters are suffering or have suffered in some way, so you sort of are forced to feel guilty or to feel badly for them. So there's a lot of pushing and pulling of your heartstrings deliberately by the author, and I really, really hate it when a writer has to do that instead of being subtle and a little bit more intelligent about the messages that he wants the reader to take away from the novel. So that's really my biggest problem. This book was just very boring. It felt completely uninteresting after the short story section, which was good. And even though I can see that this is a noble, important, necessary book, very, very important, especially considering everything that's been happening this year and past years, we need messages like this, things that make us think about who we are, things that and what we are doing in terms of the world, the environment, nature, and to one another as a society. We need to gain perspective. And yet, I really, really disliked this book. It was just awful for me. I don't understand. Well, no, I can understand why people have loved it so much and why it won the Pulitzer, but I thought it was just not for me. I really, really didn't like it. I am giving it 2 stars instead of 1 star just because I think the messages are at least noble and I agree with them. And also the short stories section of the book, The Roots, I enjoyed somewhat. I would actually refer you to Shawn the Book Maniac. He was reading this book earlier, I think it was in January of this year, and he bailed on it. But he made a Friday Reads video. I'm gonna try and link it in the description down below so you can go and check it out. I completely agree with his reasons for bailing. I didn't bail, but I wish I had, because this was just so unenjoyable, and the characters are so annoying, and so I hated them. So yeah, this was just not the book for me. 2 stars. I'm sorry, but it's just my opinion. It's just the way that it is. Now, that's the book that I finished this week. And then I started reading 2 books that I am actually enjoying immensely. And they are very different to the horribleness that was the Overstory. So I am feeling a lot better now. I am reading The Fermata and The Tiger in the Well. The Fermata by Nicholson Baker is a sort of postmodern, strange, fascinating novel about this male character. He's in his 30s and he has the ability to stop time, and this is what he coins the fermata. You know, the fermata is this sort of moment of pause, of silence, of interruption from reality. He can stop time and he can do whatever he wants. So it's like having a superpower, effectively. And this poses a lot of questions for the character, but for the reader as well. What would you do if you had this ability? What does he end up doing? What are the ramifications, the implications, the ethical, moral questions of what you can do with something like this? So in that way, I think it's a very promising book, because what the character actually ends up doing is he starts exploring and exploiting his sexual desires, his voyeuristic impulses. He starts violating women, not raping them so far. It hasn't gone that far yet, but he's certainly doing things that are immoral and problematic and questionable. But I think that's what the book wants to discuss, the moral implications of what the character is doing. He presents himself as a very moral, ethical person, but then he ends up doing these things, like he undresses women and looks at their bodies, and he starts manipulating their bodies. It's disgusting, but it's beautifully written, playfully written. In a way, it reminds me a little bit of Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov, and some other books that play with, you know, moral, ethical questions, conundrums, if you will. So it's a very interesting book, let me tell you that. And the other book that I started reading is The Tiger in the Well. This is by Philip Pullman. This is the 3rd book in the Sally Lockhart mystery series. This is a series of Victorian YA thrillers that I remember loving when I was growing up, and I am rereading them. This is book 3, and this used to be my favorite actually when I was growing up. So here we follow the wonderful character of Sally Lockhart. She is a Victorian feminist. She's wonderful. She's a badass. She's intelligent. She is fearless and savvy, and she has these wonderful friendships with interesting, lovable men. It's just wonderful. So this one it starts with Sally, who now has a daughter, and then she receives a letter telling her that someone is suing for divorce. Someone is claiming that some man is claiming that he married her, and he now wants the divorce and custody of her daughter. But this is all a lie, because, you know, Sally's husband, well, it's not husband, she never actually married him, but her daughter's father died. So this is all a lie. It's all a trap. Someone is doing this to her. So it's about finding out what is really happening and why why are they targeting Sally this way. So what I love about this is that immediately, just from the opening chapter, you immediately feel like Philip Pullman's storytelling is welcoming you. The writing is beautiful, fast-paced, evocative. It's thrilling. It's lovely. It's charming. It's perfect. I love Philip Pullman's writing, and this is exactly what I needed right now. Just something light but interesting, well written, but fast-paced and very evocative. And the storytelling is really shining through. So that's what I will be reading next week. I think it's important to discuss Richard Powers' writing in the Overstory, so maybe we can have a discussion about that or about anything you want. Thanks for watching. I am Just One Reader, and I will see you in the next video.